How's it? Welcome to the garage. So at the moment I've got a bit of beer brewing in here, but what I've found that because it's winter I'm really struggling with the temperature of the fermentation. Now I've got it in a cupboard in the garage next to the fridge and that's helping to keep it warm, but I'm finding at night it's still dropping a little bit below 18 degrees, which is not what I want. So what I did is I put a 70-watt light bulb in the cupboard and I leave that on at night, and that is really helping keeping that temperature at around 20, which is a much more ideal fermentation temperature. But then I thought, it's a bit of a hassle, and the other day I forgot to switch the light off and then the temperature went a bit too high, not high enough to kill the yeast, but higher than I would have liked, and then I have to remember to switch it on and off, and I'm not really sure what the actual temperature is all the time. So I thought, what can I do to solve this problem? So I had a look around my house, and what I actually found was one of these. Now this is a heating pad. I think it's like 12 watts or 8 watts, I can't remember. And this normally goes under a reptile cage or for some sort of a tropical animal, just to create a warm spot for them. So it's very low powered, but it just gives up a constant low heat, which could be perfect for my fermentation container. I could stick it underneath and just have this on and just keep it at the right temperature. But then I still need to control it. So I had a look around, and you can get some thermostats and you can get some switches and you get some clever things. But I didn't really find anything I liked or anything that was not very expensive. So I had a bit of a think, and then I thought, those Wi-Fi switches that I like, they've actually got one with a temperature input. So I thought, let me check that out. So I went online and I checked them out. And they do. They've got one with a temperature input, or you can have a humidity input, or any sort of input. Well, it's got a couple of input options. But I decided to order one, and it's this. This is the Sonoff TH16. And then I also ordered the temperature sensor that goes with this. So then I figured, right, this will be my controller. So now I can set a temperature band to switch on and off my heating pad, and then I can also remotely see what the temperature is at all times, so I can keep a much better eye on my fermentation process. So I haven't really got a good plan. I've got a couple of bits and pieces that I've ordered and that I found around the house, and I'm going to try and put something together. So let's give it a shot. This is what I've got so far. I've got the Sonoff, and I've got the temperature sensor for the Sonoff. I think this was like 200 and something bucks. The sensor was about 70 bucks. So not as cheap as some of the controllers you can get. You can get like a simple thermostat controller for about 50 bucks at Communica. That's where I bought these. But I decided I wanted to go with something a bit more advanced, and it's still cheaper than something like a more advanced thermostat. I think it's called a STC 1000, something like that. Those things go for about 400 bucks. So it's somewhere in the middle. So that's what I got in terms of the control. Then I bought a box to put all of this in. And I bought a plug. This is like a kettle plug. But I figured if I have this on the box, I can put whatever I want on this side and just plug it in, and then I know that my controller is going to control the output to this plug. So I can chop and change whatever I need. At the moment it might be a heating pad, maybe one day it's a heater or a light bulb, whatever. I can just change it out as needed. Then I've got a couple of other bits. Here's just a gland for the power to come in. I've got a little indicator light that's going to just tell me if the relay is on or off. Got a plug. We've got the heating pad. Couple of connectors, and then some wire. Okay, so here's my plan. I'm going to put this in. I'm just going to glue it into the container. I've got some of this cable adhesive. Normally this works pretty well. It's not very heavy, so enough of that on the bottom and left to dry should be perfect. Then I'm just going to have to choose a spot for the light. Unfortunately, I can't put it in the center. So I'll probably end up putting it like just a bit off-centered here. I'll put a little label next to it. So I'm going to do that. But yeah, let's get started. I think I'm going to start just by making the holes that I need in here. And I'll start with the easy one, and that's going to be the one for this gland. So let me start with that. So I know the size of this hole. I think it's a 20 mil hole that I need to cut. the hole saw. Let's just check the gland here. Yeah, I think that's a 20 mil. You can see it's my most used one, so it's probably, I know it's the right one, I just can't remember the size. I think it's a 20. It's rub the size right off the side here. 22 millimeter hole saw. So let's make that quickly. Flat battery. If you buy yourself an electric driver or screwdriver or drill, always get one with more than one battery. If you don't have more than one battery, you will get endlessly frustrated because your battery will always be flat. So okay, there's that. I'll just clean this up a bit, melt it a bit. My hole saws are not so sharp anymore. They've been used a lot. And the next easy one is going to be the hole that I'm going to drill for the light in the top. So I just want to check this light. It looks to be about 10 mils. So I can just draw that with a drill bit. So I've got a caliper here. Yeah, so that's a 10 mil hole that I need there. So I've got a 10 mil bit hopefully. Don't have a 10 mil bit. Not a problem. I'm going to start with an 8 mil wood bit. I always find it's pretty easy to drill through plastic with a wood bit. So if my Sonoff's going in there, I just need to check what kind of spacing I've got available. It's about 50 mils from the edge. So I'm going to come in here, maybe 25, say about there. Not critical, you know. So what I'll do is I will just make this hole, and then I will use a little sanding disc to open it up a bit. Yep. So this is meant to be a self-healing mat. So let's see how well it self-heals. Great if you want a little workshop counter for doing specialty work like this, or a little electronics work. These cutting mats are fantastic for that. Okay, so those are the easy ones, and now I need to somehow cut a hole for this thing. So to cut this, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but what I realize is I'm maybe going to use this the plug side as a template. It fits in there nicely, but it is a bit smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it as a template, and then just cut slightly bigger than the template I draw. So let's just check where that must go. I think I'll put it in this way around. Okay, so I've got a mark in there, and I'm just going to sort of center it into the middle. About the middle. So it's 75 mils, so it's about 38. Let's just call it 40 for the center. Then I will use this, looks to be about centered, as a template. Cool, so that gives me something to work from. So I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to try use a Dremel And then, well, I'm just going to cut slightly on the outside of that line, and hopefully I get it pretty damn close to fitting that in perfectly. And otherwise I can just open it up a bit on the sides. Okay, well that's an awful hole, but let's see what we can do. Ah, luckily our plug is going to cover it up, all my terrible cutting. So yeah, that wasn't the greatest. I'm going to try and find just 2 screws to put in there. I'm sure I've got something lying around. So I still actually need to get that out to a 10 mil. If I just check my little light. Oh, look at that. Yeah, so it's still slightly too small. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a countersink bit that I've got and just try and open that hole up just a little bit. From the top, I'll just do it from the top and from the bottom. There we go. Perfect. So now I'm just going to do a quick cleanup. Okay, so I cleaned everything up and then I realized I've forgotten 1 or 2 things that I need to make a hole for. So one is the sensor on the side, so I'm going to do that. I'm just going to try and approximate where it needs to be. I think I'll have a little bit of slack. I've got one pencil. I'm just going to check from the top here where that sensor hole sits. So it looks like it's going to sit actually exactly on one of these little notches, which is fine. I can drill through that from the outside. It's not going to be a big deal. So I'm just going to measure from the outside. That is 42 millimeters. So I know it's 42 mils in, and then down. I'm going to measure down from here. So that's 70 mils. About 70, and from the bottom it's another 10 mils to the center. So I need to go 60 mils from the top and 42 millimeters in. So I'm going to measure that from like here. $60 from the top and 42 in. So it's about there. That seems about right. Look at this like this as well. It's going to go for it. So I'm going to drill another 8 mil hole in there. And that should be big enough to get that sensor cable through. So it just needs to be slightly wider. I'm going to use the same trick. I'm just going to bore it out a bit. But let me just check how the alignment is on this side. Looks like it's going to line up nicely. I'm just going to use a countersink bit quickly. And there, now that it's got a little bit of a countersink bevel around it, it's just a bit neater. Cable fits in nicely. Let's just check it with the Sonoff. So if it's in position, there we go. Beautiful. Good. Okay. That's fine. I'm going to put that aside. And then the last thing I need to do is put this socket in this horrible hole that I've made a mess of. Mostly covered up by the socket, luckily. I'm a bit embarrassed about that, but it's fine. I found some little screws, and they are the perfect size to just go in there. So I just want to drill a little pilot hole quickly. I'm going to line this up nicely, and then I'm going to drill a hole. Okay. So the box is ready now, and now we just need to do some basic assembly. So I'm just trying to decide on what we're going to do first. I'm getting my soldering iron heating up, so I think we'll have to solder a couple of things just in case. And I'm looking at what we need to do, and what I've decided we need to do is we need to definitely solder some wires onto the end of this neon indicator. Now I tried to put on the just the terminal lugs, but they don't really fit on here that well. There's a funny little piece of wire that also comes down here, so I'm going to solder directly onto that. Then on the socket is cool because then I can put on terminal connectors or terminal lugs. So I'm just going to prepare those. And then with the Sonoff, we just need to actually open it up and see what's going on inside in terms of connections. So let's do that. So what we've got here is actually push-in connectors. So you push this down. It's called a spring clamp. You push it down, then you push the wire in, and you just release it. And then it grips the wire. So that's pretty easy to use. But the one slight complication is that this output live on this side, we're going to actually have to put two wires into, because we need to be able to power up our indicator. I think what we're going to do here is we're actually just going to maybe wire it out to a terminal block, and then we can wire from the terminal block, we can wire out to the indicator light, and we can wire to the socket. That'll work fine. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put that aside for now. Let's start with what we need to solder. So the thing we need to solder is this little indicator light. Got a little holder magody thing here. And I'm going to use this white twin flex that I've got lying around. It's inside the box. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. And I'm going to save the black for the outside, where I'm going to go and connect to the heater. Just a bit neater, I think. Just being a bit OCD. We don't need very thick wires here. It draws very little current. There's actually a built-in resistor in the neon light to limit the current. So we don't have to worry about high currents here at all. So I've just stripped off the ends here. I've twisted them together nicely, and I'm just going to make them quite short. They need to be quite short so they don't have any risk of arcing against or touching, and there being an arc between them just on that small surface area there. So I'm just going to make a small little connection here. And I'm just going to tin these first with a bit of copper. Just makes the whole process a little bit easier. So here's my solder. I think I might have just said I'm going to tin them with copper. That's definitely not right. I'm going to tin them with solder onto the copper. And then I'm going to do the same with this little switch here. Ultimately, it's going to make my connection much, much easier to make. Alright, that's ready. So now let's just put on our connections here. Now we don't really have to worry about live and neutral. This is AC, single phase, so it doesn't matter which is which. That's one. And there's the other. So now I've made a nice connection here onto my neon light. So this doesn't have to be a very long cable, because we're just going to stick it through this side here. It's going to come in and it's going to have to connect onto a connector block or something in this box. So I'm just going to give it a cut, trim it down a bit, somewhere around here. I can cut it down shorter later if I need it as well. So we can set that aside for now. That one's ready. Next thing I think I'm going to mount on here is actually the... Actually, no, I don't think I'm going to mount the socket at all. I think the next thing I must do is start getting the positions of everything I need. So the Sonoff, I know, is going to go over there. Then I need to bring in my cable. So let me get my supply cable and my gland. So I'm just going to prepare this. Whenever you're working with glands, just remember to put the cap and the grommet through first before you fix your gland. Otherwise, you'll forget, and then you have to take it all apart again. So this is going to look like this. These PVC ones you can normally just tighten by hand, give it a little nip if you want with the adjustable spanner, but it's not necessarily critical. Now for this guy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this long enough to come inside to connect there, but also I'm going to want a bit of extra slack that I can use to wire off onto my socket, because my socket also needs to have a big enough cable to supply all the current that I could be taking out of this. So I'm going to use the same multi-strand cable that's inside here to come out to these sockets. So I think I must cut it about... I think I'm going to strip it to about here. Okay, so made some nice long tails here. Now it's time to gland this. Okay, that's nicely secured now. Now I need to just measure off exactly how long these cables need to be, so I can cut off the slack and use it for my other connections. That's the neutral, the live. I think this should be more than long enough. So I'm just going to prepare these quickly, just so that when we're ready to connect, everything is ready to go. So now we've got that ready. Now I'm going to see what I need to do to get this other connection ready to go here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to come out, and then we're going to have to go here. But halfway, we're going to put a connector block in. So what I'm actually going to do first is I'm just going to put the lugs on the end of these cables, and then we're going to have a better idea of where we need to connect. So let's strip these also. Now you don't necessarily have to use a lug for this. You could also use you could solder this directly on. That'll work fine. I just happen to have lugs at home, so I'm going to use them. Just make sure your connections are nice and strong. These ones are good. So that's fine. So that's what's going to connect onto the socket. So now we know where that's going to stand. I'm just going to dry fit this all together. Just make sure that you make your connections right. Luckily it is written on the back for you. But if you get confused, opposite to wiring a plug, you need to look from the front to see which is right and live. So this, in this case, this is your live. So now I can see that I've got plenty of space inside my box. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to cut this about halfway, and I'm going to put on a connector block. Well, I'm actually not going to cut the earth because there's no earth required for the neon lights. I'm just going to cut the live and the neutral halfway, put it on a connector block, and that will give me something to wire my neon light into as well. So these are the connector blocks I have. Although you get some pretty cool ones now where you just actually have to slide the connection in, and it's like a spring connection like on the Sonoff. And that really helps a lot. The only problem is they are quite expensive compared to this sort of connector block. But they really do make a good and simple connection. And you can reuse them if you want. I think you even get some of them where you don't even have to strip the cable off. It just punctures right through the cable and it makes your connection like that. If you can see them, I know I've seen them at AC/DC. I think they're manufactured by Wago or Vargo. And if you can get hold of those and you're prepared to pay, use them. They are fantastic. Okay, there's my plug. So that's the live and the neutral ready. And then on the other side of this, I'm just going to put these little bits that are going to connect from the connector block into the Sonoff. I just want to make this slightly longer because I want to twist this together along with the cables for the neon light. Now, easy thing to forget to do is to actually put your cables through the hole first. I've done this many times. So just make sure you put it through the hole and make sure you put it on the screw for the back as well. Otherwise, you're going to connect everything and have to take it apart again to secure your lamp or whatever it is to your box or whatever it is. So those are on in the right order. Same goes for the socket. So I'm going to stick that through now into my terrible hole that I'm super embarrassed about. And now we can make our connection with the little jumper pieces. So what I sometimes like to do is make these lugs or these stripped off bits of bare copper slightly longer. Then what you can do is when you stick them in your connector block, if you undo both screws, you can stick it all the way through to the other side. So you can even capture both wires on both sides of the screw. Not necessary, but sometimes can be helpful if you want to make sure you got a really good strong connection. And there's the live. So you can legally have two wires into a connector block into one terminal. The same goes for a circuit breaker, and that is according to SANS 10142, but 2 is the limit. If you need 3, you'll need to start making some sort of a connector block. Just make sure everything's tight. Make sure you don't over tighten these connector blocks, otherwise sometimes they can split at the bottom and they'll become completely loose, or you won't notice and they'll get hot, and that's the worst case scenario that you can have, because that can become a fire risk. But if you're reasonable and you're not trying to strongman this thing, you'll be just fine. So now that those connections are made, I think I'm just going to mount the outlet. So I've got my screws. I drilled pilot holes here. Although this plastic probably won't crack, you don't necessarily want to try and force a screw in here with the driver. And you also don't want to over tighten these screws, otherwise you are going to strip the plastic. So just tighten it until it feels reasonably tight and your socket is secure. Shouldn't move around, and you just got to remember you're going to be pulling things in and out of it, so it should be strong. Okay, that's done. So we've prepared that. Our cable coming in, we've got our cable going out. Now we just need to deal with the insides of this box. So I'm going to now make all my connections before I align this with the hole in the side and glue it down. So let's start with our incoming connection. So like I said, this is a push down terminal. I'm going to use the neutral on the side here. I'm actually going to use a small screwdriver. That's better. Okay, that's live. Now let me connect the neutral. Oh, sorry, that's the neutral for the incoming supply. Let me collect the outgoing supply neutral, because those are just actually bridged inside the Sonoff. They're not switched in any way. Just want to try and neaten this up a bit inside here. Okay, that's the neutral. The next is our input live. We just follow the diagram on top. So that will be this one here. It's good. And then it's our two earths. And then finally our outgoing live. Just going to bring it around this side. There we go. So check all your connections are tight, and then I'm going to put on the cover to hold all these wires in place. So I'm just going to split them 3 and 3 like that. Put this cover on. Okay, there's our connection made. It's quite neat. I'm just going to push this down into position. There we go. That's cool. So now I'm going to just align this, and I'm going to just check where I need to glue it down so that I can fit the temperature sensor in the side. So I'll plug the temperature sensor in like that. That looks pretty much butted up against there. It's kind of going to work. Yeah, that looks good. So before I do that, I'm quickly gonna just secure the neon indicator as well, so I can neaten up this cable. And that's pretty much it. Just do one last check that everything is secure. There's no funny bits sticking out. Got all the gunk out of here. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in this cord. I'm going to glue down the Sonoff, and I'm just going to let that glue dry for a bit. I've used cable glue on a couple of things before that are not necessarily cables, but it's pretty good with these plastic bits. The trick though is it's kind of like contact. You want to pressure down, and then you just want to release it for a couple of minutes so that you can allow that glue to get sticky, and then you push it down again and then it sticks for good. Okay, I've got it nicely aligned, and I'm just going to stick something on heavy on top here for now, just to try and keep this pushed down into position. Now we can just set this aside for now. I'm probably going to leave it for about an hour while that dries. So in the meantime, what we can do is we can put the plug on the end of our supply cable. So I've already covered this in a video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm not going to cut this any shorter for now. If I find the need, it's quite a long cable, but if I find the need, I will then make it shorter when need be. Magic. Now the final bit of assembly we really have to do is actually connect up the heating pad. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to connect cables onto the connector blocks on this side, and I'm going to terminate it inside this plug. So let's get ahead with that now. Also, I'm going to leave this cable quite long. I can always cut it shorter in the future, but at this stage, while I'm still sort of getting my setup going, I don't know exactly where everything's going to be in its final positions, so I think it's just better if I leave it long. Because this is such a thin little cable, what I'm going to do is actually going to double over the ends, just so it's got a little bit more to grip inside the connector block. And then what also I'm going to do is I'm just going to tin these a bit with solder, just to make it a bit more solid. Just going to wait for the soldering iron to warm up. So in the meantime, we'll do the other side. I've not opened one of these plugs before. I'm not exactly sure what the connections look like inside. Pretty easy. So this cable obviously is way too thin to go inside here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tie a knot in it on this end, on the inside, so it doesn't pull back through this connection, and then I'm also going to tape it off so it just doesn't pull out, because this cable is way too thin. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this with a cable that is going to draw any significant power, but then also you wouldn't be having this problem, because then you are going to possibly run into issues of heat. You risk damaging the cores. So I wouldn't do it with a very thick cable, and I wouldn't do it very tightly, but I'm going to do it here just tight enough to make sure that I'm not going to slip back through this cable clamp here. It's too thin to catch my cable, but I'm at least going to try and use it to prevent my cable coming out. That should do the trick. Now the connection inside here is exactly the same as your normal connection. You've got a, if you look at it from the back, you've got your live on the right and your neutral on the left, and it's also marked inside this one. It says live, earth, and neutral. This heater does not have an earth, so I don't need to worry about that. So I'm just going to connect up my live and my neutral. Now the reason I'm not tinning these ends is because they're actually going into a flat connector. It's kind of sandwiching them. It's not like a little screw on that one. It's actually got a flat panel or a flat connector that it's squeezing together, so it's going to get a good connection. In fact, it might even get a better connection like this because I'm not limiting the surface area. So that's the first one done. And there's the second one secured in place. So that looks good to me. Now we can just close it up. That's cool. So let's see now. I think our soldering iron is up to heat. Let's just grab our cable. Just want to make sure you get a nice coating of solder all around this end, because that'll give you a nice thing for your screw connection to clip onto. That looks good. Now I'm just going to connect up the heating pad. Okay, those connections are good. But if you can see here, actually there's quite a lot of this connection lug that was on this heating pad when I got it that sticks out. So I'm just going to insulate these both nicely with tape, just to make sure that we've got a nice insulated connection. And there we got a good connection. So we are just about ready. We've got our heating pad connected on both sides. We have our plug connected to our box, and all we're waiting for is the glue to dry so we can complete that box, get everything set up, and we're good to go. Okay, so eventually the glue has dried on my Sonoff and it is nice and secure. I've plugged in the temperature sensor and I've also plugged in the heater. What I've done is I've connected it to my EB-Link app, and I've already done a video on setting up one of these Sonoffs, so I'll put a link to that in the description below. So you can see I've created a new connection, and it's called brewery, and that is the switch. Pretty optimistic considering I'm only brewing one bucket of beer, but you never know. And now we can see that we've got a temperature currently being read of 25.1 degrees. It has been slowly dropping since I plugged it in. And we are in manual mode and the device is off. So I'm first going to test that it is switching the heater on and off. So I'll do that by saying on. And now the Sonoff is on, and after a few minutes we should be able to see some heat in our heating pad. And it looks like we are actually getting a bit of heat already. So I'm going to go ahead and now switch that off. And that allows me to manually switch on and off the heater depending on what the temperature is. But I don't want that. I want to actually be able to automatically control this based on the temperature. So what I'm going to do is I want to set this into auto. So in auto, when the temperature reaches more than, in my brewing situation, I'm going to set this to operate between 21 and 23 degrees. It's quite a tight band, and I'm going to see how it goes, but hopefully that's going to keep my brew right about there. Maybe I'll go 20 to 21, 22 maybe. I'll give it some thought. But for now, just for testing, what I want to do is I want to set this so that we can test that it actually operates correctly. So I'm going to set the higher temperature to higher than what we're currently at. We're at 24.5 degrees now. I'm going to set this to 26 degrees, because I think if I hold that temperature in my hand, I will get it to 26 degrees, and then the switch should switch off. I'm going to say confirm. I forgot to set the lower, and then I'm going to set, when it goes lower than 25 degrees, it should switch on. So when I say confirm, the heating pad should actually switch on. Confirm. And there it switched on because the temperature is below 25 degrees. Now I'm going to try and heat this up to more than 26 degrees, and hopefully it should then switch off. So I've noticed the temperature response is quite slow, but that is okay. This is not a very quick responding process that I've got. There we go, 28.3, and our heater is switched off. Now if you give this a minute or two, you'll probably find that it will drop below 24 or 25 degrees, and then it will switch back on. I'm going to try to hurry this process along a bit and just stick it in some water. This probe is waterproof, So you can immerse it in water if you like, but I wouldn't put it into the beer. That may cause contamination issues. 24.2, and our heater switched back on. So now we know our heater is operating automatically within a control band. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up for my situation. I'm going to put it in the cupboard and I'm going to see how it works. So the last thing I've just got to do here is close up this box, which I'm going to do now. And there's the finished product. Now, some of you might notice that this looks a little bit like The Internet from the IT crowd. And if you haven't watched that show, I'd recommend you just maybe go and give it a watch. It is good fun. One point I do want to work on is I did check in the manual, and it did recommend that you don't unplug and plug in the sensor while the Sonoff is switched on. It could cause damage, and it will cause it to reset. So I'd recommend just switching off your device before you plug and unplug it. Now, if you enjoyed this video or you found it useful, let me know in the comments and maybe give it a like. And if you would like to, consider subscribing to the channel. Like I've said before, electricity is dangerous, so please be careful when you're working with electricity, and if you're not comfortable, please get professional help. And until next time, stay safe.